IVM.
Hi, we're Team Splainer. Welcome to an all-new episode of Press Decode, a weekly podcast where we take Splainer's mission to declutter the news one step further. Check out our newsletter for more stories and follow us at Splainer In to keep up with all the fun things we plan for our Splainer fam. So sit back, relax, and don't let the news give you the blues. I'm Vagda and I have with me Sarah and Samreen. Take it away, Sarah.
I'm Sarah. Some say I'm funny. Some others would argue I am the joke. I guess you guys can listen and decide for yourselves.
Hi, I'm Samreen, your resident drama queen who has been thrust into the world of adulting. Clearly a disaster waiting to happen. Or maybe a miracle?
I'm Vagda, your host for the day, a proud cancellist of the hustle culture, mostly at the receiving end of everlasting pop culture recommendations, to which I politely say I'm adding to my list. But there is no list. This is not to discount the fact that I fell hard for the hot priest and Fleabag. I'm obsessed with Andrew Scott, guys. As always, we have 3 segments for you. In our big story today, we'll be discussing the state of India's food security and how it measures in the Global Hunger Index rankings. In our Food for Thought segment, we'll be talking about the impact of social media on our health in context of reports of teenage girls developing tic because of TikTok. Finally, we'll be roasting and toasting our fave or least fave items. All right, let's begin with our big story. So last weekend, the Global Hunger Index of 2021 was released, which dropped India's rank from 94 to 101 in a data set that has 116 countries. So India is 15 ranks higher than the worst performing country in terms of hunger. The government of India is obviously pissed that it can't be behind all its neighbors, including Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. Imagine Afghanistan is at 103, literally 2 rank lower than India.
I can imagine the government have a breakdown, like collectively just like, holy shit, what happened?
So obviously it's been attacking the index for its unscientific methodology. But what is the index about? So the index was established in 2006 as a way to comprehensively measure and track hunger at global, regional, and national levels. It is published by 2 nonprofits based in Ireland and Germany who draw their data from UN agencies like FAO, WHO, UNICEF, and other international organizations like the World Bank. It has 4 indicators that it uses to arrive at the ranking. The first is undernourishment, which gauges how much of the population has an insufficient caloric intake. Second is child wasting, that accounts for children under the age of 5 who have low weight for their height. Child stunting looks at the share of children under 5 who have low height for their age. And child mortality accounts for deaths of children under 5. So taking into account all of this, India falls into the serious category, a significant improvement since the year 2000 when we were in the alarming category. One of the complaints that the government has about the index's methodology is their measure of undernourishment. Now, according to the government, the scientific measurement of undernourishment would require measurement of weight and height. But most international organizations use calorie intake factor, which honestly, India has used to determine its poverty line to gauge undernourishment since the 1970s. Like right from Alag to Lakdawala to Rangarajan, all the committees over the years have recommended it. So I don't get what the problem is.
I have to say here, you're like such a lawyer where you just use these 3 names of like people like I've heard of them, but I would never just go like
it's hard
Alag to Lakdawala to Rangarajan.
Yeah, it's hard to leave behind where you come from,
Okay, so I am just trying to understand how hunger is measured. Basically, according to the FAO, the Food and Agricultural Organization, hunger and malnutrition is measured in calories, right? So what they mean is that the food energy intake is measured in calories. But if we are measuring using this, then some foods like rice and pulses contain fewer calories than others like meat. But then isn't a small amount of rice more filling as compared to just eating meat? Does this mean that people in countries which have a low calorie intake and consume foods like corn, wheat, and rice go hungry, as compared to countries who consume higher calorie foods like meat, milk, and eggs? Sounds kind of confusing to me. This cannot be an apt measure for hunger, can it? Okay, so now according to an assistant professor in JNU, there is no correlation between nutritional intake indicators such as calorie intake and nutritional outcome indicators such as body mass index for adults or underweight, stunting, and wasting for children.
Oh my God, yes. I can eat as much as I want and I will still be, I don't know, undernourished. No, not undernourished, but like, what is that?
Malnutrition?
No, as in,
Way.
maybe if I was like, okay, this is a stupid point. I'm not going to make it.
Okay, so then he further explains that a lower calorie intake, which does not necessarily mean deficiency, can also be because of reduced physical activity, a better social infrastructure like better roads, transport, and healthcare, or access to energy saving appliances at home.
Mm-hmm.
So, now for a vast and diverse country like India, using a uniform calorie as a universal means to measure hunger basically means that you are failing to recognize the huge regional differences in the country, which may lead to a differentiated requirement of calories at the state level. Now, if we look at it from this point, a large percentage of the people in Kerala and Tamil Nadu may get counted as calorie deficit, right? Because they have better infrastructure despite them in being better nutritional health.
Okay. So this also means that we can't actually have a uniform measure of nourishment.
Exactly. Because on the other hand, there are some states like Bihar and Uttar Pradesh that have a higher average level of calorie intake, but their needs may even be higher than the estimated level of calories because these states have a higher number of sick people as well as more poverty-stricken people.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. So one thing is very clear, that calorie intake is definitely not the best indicator, right? But in the absence of another, it is used to determine nourishment both in the country as well as outside the country. Hell, literally, Niti Aayog wrote about this in a study in 2017 where they used calorie intake to gauge the level of nutrition.
Lol.
Why am I not surprised?
So, see, different people have different nutritional needs, right? They have different needs for their body, which means that their nutritional intake will also vary. So, this creates huge confusion regarding the severity of hunger and undernutrition in the country. So, basically, really, when you criticize, first look inside.
Yeah, I mean, ek to pehle hi, you know, if your credibility of your criticism goes down the moment you say that whatever ranking has come out has been to target you and make sure that your rank is low. I mean, no one cares about India, okay? India is not the center of the universe. Just get over it.
Excuse me? Is this all the Desh Bhakti you've learned? Offensive.
Hashtag anti-national.
Aha. Tukde. Anyway. So in addition to the fact that maybe our system of measuring hunger itself may be warped, I'm always going to be baffled by something a professor of mine pointed out during undergrad. India's food go-downs are literally overflowing. And yet, we are home to one of the largest numbers of undernourished people in the world. Just since the pandemic began, around 9.7 crore additional people faced moderate to severe food insecurity. All while the government had stockpiles of 120 million tons of food grains in its go-downs. 120 million tons. That is an insane amount of food grains. And yet people go hungry. So why does India have such high levels of food insecurity and hunger? Well, the same reason is mostly any form of inequality in this country. Widespread economic distress and high rates of unemployment. And to top it all, a really, really faulty public food distribution system or PDS. I'm going to try my best to explain just what's wrong with the PDS in the briefest way possible. So the biggest overall issue is a severe mismatch between the availability of food, which we've established is in surplus, and accessibility to food, which is evidently where the problem lies. Now, I'm not even going to get into the obvious figures of corruption and the gross inaccuracies of even the bare minimum of identifying beneficiaries correctly. Like, those numbers are warped and we know it. But more basic problems exist. Like there is a mandatory requirement of a ration card in order to even access PDS. And a ration card, for those of you who don't know, requires a proof of address. So poof, scores of homeless people and unorganized workers are immediately ignored by the system. The people who need it more than others.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Exactly. Like when I found this out, I was shocked because I couldn't even as privileged as it may sound, I had no idea that this could be how bad policy is. And this is, of course, this is barring the temporary provisions in some states like Delhi, Jharkhand, Rajasthan, Telangana, that during the pandemic have allowed access to ration with or without a card. But overall, you need a card. Moreover, did you guys actually know that the PDS distributes grains per family and not per person? So a household of 5 people and 8 people or 10 people are entitled to the same quantity of grains.
That's messed up.
All this, exactly. I don't even understand who is making these policies, like honestly. All this while we have surplus grains. And successive governments have only stressed on availability of food grains and deliberately ignored the accessibility bit, thereby allowing them a way to skirt most international reports about hunger. So yes, of course, this is defamation. This is not bad policy.
What we do need instead is a proper system that universalizes access to food grains without getting caught up in the bureaucracy of ration card, so that the surplus of 120 million tons of grain don't go unused.
Precisely. I mean, that's all. We should be policymakers, Vagda.
Oh, don't tell me that. That's where I've come from.
Oh, no. Journalism needs you more. Stay.
On that note, we come to the end of this segment. We'll be back after a short break. You're listening to Press Decode on the IVM Podcasts Network.
Namaste, this is Cyrus Brocha. I am part of the government cancel culture program to remove rubbish off all the different streams available. So what we have is all the collected rubbish we put together on our show. It's called Cyrus Says. It's on IVM Podcast. You have to watch it and listen to it. It's on our app. It's on our website. It's on the YouTube channel. It's on Facebook. There are many different ways. Don't bother me and ask me how. You have to find out. We talk to different personalities. Many of them are known. Some are just people we meet downstairs and invite them up for chai. But the point is, it's fun and it's very therapeutic. So please join in and listen to Cyrus Says.
Hello and welcome back to Press Decode on the IVM Podcast Network. We're Team Splainer, and make sure you follow us at SplainerIn on Instagram and Twitter to keep up with the Splainer fam. We're now ready for some food for thought. So, since the beginning of the pandemic, teenage girls across US, Canada, Australia, and the UK have been complaining of tics. That is, not the dog tics. This is physical.
Really?
Yeah, just in case,
Thanks, man.
So if you don't know what tics are, they are physical jerking movements and verbal outbursts. It's sort of like a nervous disorder. So doctors across these countries are seeing these cases increase and they don't have answers. According to them, girls with tics are rare. And suddenly you have so many coming to you with the same symptoms. Literally before the pandemic, some pediatricians saw 1 girl a month with these symptoms, and now they reportedly see 10 in 1 month.
Wow.
Whoa.
Yeah. And now they're saying that all the girls have the same thing in common, and that is TikTok. Doctors say the girls have been watching videos of TikTok influencers who say they had the Tourette syndrome, which is a nervous system disorder that causes people to make repetitive, involuntary movements or sounds. And we have a Bollywood movie also on the syndrome. I don't know if you've seen it, Hichki, starring Rani Mukherjee.
I started watching and I couldn't finish watching it because it was filmed in the college that I studied in, and I was like, nope, I refuse to engage.
Usually, that's something that drives people to watch movies. If it was in my college, I might have been interested in watching that movie.
Same.
So I'm from Xavier's Bombay. Half of Bollywood movies are filmed there. You just get sick of it.
Okay.
So good thing TikTok is banned in India, no?
Okay.
But anyway, like, how do you get a disorder by just watching some videos? A decade ago, there was a case in which several teens in New York developed tics that were diagnosed as mass psychogenic illness. But such cases were mostly confined to small geographic locations, right? And now with social media and its worldwide reach, it can be spread around as quickly as you want.
Wow.
But I think it all comes down to like how all of us have like read and watched about stuff about like the ill effects of social media on our health, and especially the health of the young. Oh, sorry, I am talking to young people here.
Jesus.
So the internet is flooded with reports of how social media is addictive. Yes, it lowers self-esteem for our teenagers, how it exposes teens to cyberbullying and body image issues. But most recently, we learned through Facebook's leaked documents that they literally know Instagram is bad for teens' health, and yet.
It gets worse, right? You also saw reports that they're also building Insta for kids, right?
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like, we know it. We're not going to do anything of what we have already. We're just going to make new platforms and make the issue way worse.
Yeah, what is that for? I'm sure they'll use like addictive technology for that as well. I mean, social media is really a jungle at this point. I mean, that we've moved forth from the time when we found crimes being reported anonymously on 4chan to this. I don't know how to make sense of any of this. So, Sarah, what do you think?
Okay, so this is definitely one flip side of TikToks that, well, is really unprecedented, as you'd say, with the word of this pandemic season, wherein I wouldn't even imagine you'd get actual tricks by just watching TikTok. And I mean, it makes sense now that you say it, but you wouldn't expect it. But the other more pertinent question I always have when you talk about social media is, why do people willingly put their lives in literal danger for internet challenges? And more so on TikTok, like, what is with this? I mean, because even the tics comes from a sense of virality that doesn't let you stop watching, and hence you get so affected, right?
Mm.
And I mean, think about it. From the Tide Pod challenge that saw everyone swallowing detergent, to the Benadryl challenge, to dry scooping, which is when people gulp heaps of protein powder without diluting it properly, to the milk crate challenge that had people jumping milk crates in some weird fashion, but eventually it ended up in most people falling flat on their faces. What makes people do stupid things on social media? And I mean, yeah, the answer obviously lies in the high rate of validation that doing these challenges comes with, but I'm still baffled. So while researching for the pod, I was reading all sorts of articles about the TikTok phenomenon, if you may, and found an article literally titled "Don't Get TikTok, Here's an Explainer." I think it's the most boomer article on earth. Like,
Can you share the link of that, please?
you're not a boomer.
But I still don't get TikTok.
Fair enough. I mean, now there's no need to get TikTok. It was banned. The government got your back, fuck them. This was dated November 2019. So, like, way back and the good old pre-COVID days. Anyway, even back then, the author identified what keeps the platform ticking, if I can say so.
My God.
I apologize. I sometimes...
I'm not sure if you want to joke about it.
I know, but bad puns and badly timed jokes are my thing. Anyway, it was basically the understanding that strange and like being strange and relatable, it resonates. And so dangerous fads and stunts that FYI have had a very long history now become more and more popular because, like you pointed out, the internet just makes it easier for it to go around the world much quicker. Just as long as they're strange and relatable, you will inevitably find an audience. I mean, think about it. The ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, most people I knew of who did it had no clue where this was coming from and why you were doing it. They were just dunking themselves in ice for no reason at all. It's frankly stupid. But again, let me be honest. I don't discount human stupidity to be a valid reason behind this phenomenon. Considering I was sort of surprised, sort of not, to find out that way back in the 1920s, people just up and decided to sit on flagpoles in the US for days on end, sometimes even falling to death while attempting to do so, because they were challenged to see how long you could do it.
Yeah. I don't think human stupidity is that recent, though. I'm sure there are more than enough instances.
Oh, it's the 1920s. Okay, fair enough.
Maybe that's the oldest record that you could like get.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I haven't heard of people just like, करके दिखाओ, नहीं कर सकते, मैंने बोला था ना.
Yeah, I mean, and minus social media, I remember as a kid, when we went for these birthday parties or, those parties that you'd like end up going for after the exam is over, like those friends you go out with. And then we would go to like this Pizza Hut or something and challenge other kids to...
Oh my God. Is this that Coke and ketchup thing that you stole?
Yes, it's Coke, ketchup and like oregano and chili flakes and all of that shit that is on your table when you get to Pizza Hut. All of that in one drink. And you challenge people to drink it. People drank it, man.
You're disgusting. And I also want to remind everyone who hasn't heard the older episode, Vagda only challenged people to do it. She never did it.
Yeah.
She is as bad as like social media algorithms. But but the point is, now with these dangerous fads hitting the internet, there is the nature of challenge and enticement just becomes easier to spread. And don't get me wrong, as much as I criticized it, I get falling into this trap, considering I am literally the most competitive person you will ever come across. I am horrible at game nights. But at least I have a moderate.
It's not very hard to imagine.
Thank you. But also, you can't have fun at game night without someone like me. Then it's just boring.
No. Oh my God, no.
So, but
I
at
have
least-
enough fun without competitive people in game nights.
Oh, come on. But at least I have a moderately, I know, despite being competitive, I have a moderately decent level of risk assessment, unlike a lot more of the internet population that truly lives in a delusional optimism that the bad outcomes just won't happen to them. I, on the other hand, am almost certain if something can possibly go wrong, it will very much go wrong with me alone. So I guess being Grumps pays off sometimes.
Yes, this is why you were more COVID compliant also,
That is true.
right?
Yeah, that is true.
Okay, so now speaking of stupid and weird challenges on social media, users become so attuned to the things they saw on social media that they subconsciously started imitating these behaviors or tics. Proves how serious of an issue social media addiction can be, So in my opinion, social media should always come with a warning label. Excess usage is toxic to health. I mean, it could also be regulated, but is that really feasible? So now, according to Forbes, our main concern should be how to effectively regulate such platforms while differentiating between their various forms. Now, let me explain what this means. See, dating sites like Tinder or Bumble, or social media apps like Instagram, Facebook, merge with digital content creators and typically monetize their interactions through an advertising revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Since these platforms do not generally create their content, they claim that they are not responsible for what users produce and are thus exempt from the libel, defamation, and other laws and regulations that govern traditional media like newspapers and television.
Yeah.
See, here I'm thinking, when we're talking about regulating content, that is where we get into territory which is difficult, hard, and sort of bordering into freedom of speech, What I'm thinking about regulating is, why not the algorithm? Because the dynamics are very different. If you start regulating content,
Yeah.
that's going to be harder for you. Why can't you regulate the algorithm, which is now currently based on research, which is actually terrible? You know that it's based on psychological research, which makes it addictive. Literally, we've all seen that Social Dilemma, that documentary on social media, right? All the people who work for these firms, I mean, at least the hotshots, they all claim that they don't give their children phones or access to social media until they are much older. What is the point of that? I mean, you're kind of regulating social media in your own house like you would regulate drugs, maybe, or alcohol,
Yeah, when you put it like that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. But maybe, you never know. It's their secret plan for, world domination. You never know with these people, man.
That's exactly the point why you should be regulating it.
We hope.
Right?
We hope that the government does something. But I don't know. See, with social media, freedom of speech and opinion is possible. But these platforms assume no responsibility for what their users communicate. In fact, we are all aware that we are being manipulated, but still cannot escape the endless cycle of consumption as it has become an integral and inescapable part of our lives. I mean, can you imagine a social media blackout? I would get total FOMO. I can't.
I don't know if I'll be happy with it. I think I might be. Ever since I've gone off Facebook, since 2017, I'm happy, man. I'm really happy.
I mean, I was mortified for those couple of hours last week, 2 weeks ago, when Insta, Facebook, and WhatsApp were down. I didn't know what to do with my life. It was 11 in the night. I went and put a face mask because I'm like, ab kya karna hai? So, I mean, yeah, the algorithm sucks, but sign me up, I guess.
Wow. With that, we come to the end of our second segment. We'll be right back after a short break. You're listening to Press Decode on the IVM Podcast Network.
Hello, everybody. It's been another great week on the IVM Podcasting Network. On Know Your Kanun, Amber talks to Anshula Kapoor about her social celebrity charity Fankind, the ideology of the charity, and the various regulations behind this concept. On 30 Minute Rasta with Keshav, meet three of the most breathtaking kompas that are situated near Leh. On Shunyavan, Chilita and I talk to Giridhar Yasa, Chief Technology Officer at Lending Card. On Say No to Drama, Chetna unravels the law of attraction and the spirituality surrounding it. And on the Life Manifesto, Zarina explains what it takes to be courageous with an interesting Spartan ideology from ancient history. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you enjoyed this show, or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. We appreciate the word of mouth. And finally, we'd like to thank the sponsors on our network this week: Cred, Bank of Baroda Quarter, CoinSwitch Kuber, Slay Coffee, Intel, and Kotak Mahindra Bank. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Welcome back to Press Decode on the IVM Podcast Network. It's time for our final segment this week, Roast or Toast. Sarah, we're ready for you to shit on things.
Okay, so in addition to being slightly grumpy, as has been established, I'm also extremely immature. So my least fave story this week was Swedish scholars deciphering what the slut in the manuscript for John Steinbeck's epic novel, The Grapes of Wrath meant. Basically, the end of the manuscript had the word slut scrawled in red ink, but the deciphered meaning is all sorts of disappointing. Basically, slut is the Swedish expression for the word the end, and has been used on the last page of all kinds of books, especially children's books.
Shit.
Yep,
Horror.
I'm heartbroken. The sheer range of jokes that were lost out on. But at least for a teeny tiny ray of hope, Steinbeck is 100% not Swedish, and his only connection to the region is a trip in the summer of 1937. And thus maybe, just maybe, he had used it to be silly, knowing full well what people would think.
Ah,
I'm hoping. I'm really hoping.
that's some consolation for your 12-year-old boy
Yes.
heart.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Okay, I have a fave item this week. And obviously, it's the shredded Banksy. So as you might have heard before, we spoke about a Banksy painting that was to go up for auction. The story is that in 2018, this painting by Banksy called Girl with Balloon went up for auction, sold for $1.2 million. But the moment the gavel came down, the thing shredded itself with a shredder installed in the frame. Now that shredded painting, which is half shredded, by the way, it's called Love in the Bin, and it went up for auction. It was reportedly estimated to fetch around $5.5 million to $8.3 million in auction. Of course, we spoke about it at length in the September 9 edition of Press Decode. But you know how much it actually sold for? $25.4 million. That's 4 times the price that was estimated. And why I love this? I mean, do you guys know me by now or what? Huh? I'm always batting for ridiculous art. Consider me your resident pretentious art critic. #hoity-toity.
Okay, so I also have a fave item for this week. And my fave item was the totally shocking winners of the Planeta Prize. I found it totally hilarious that a renowned female Spanish author turned out to be actually 3 middle-aged men. Like, can you imagine, like, the looks in the audience's faces is not 1, but 3 men get up on stage to receive an award meant for a female author. To top it all off, these men are actually scriptwriters who have worked on Spanish shows such as On Duty Pharmacy, Central Hospital, and No Heaven Without Breasts. This totally cracked me up.
My God.
Wow, why am I not surprised 3 men taking an opportunity that we all thought was for a woman?
Sarah. And that was our show this week. Thank you so much for joining us on Press Decode. You can catch us every Thursday on the IVM Podcast Network. And guys, please remember, don't let the news give you the blues.
From uncensored and unfiltered chats with the who's who of the entertainment industry, I, Siddharth Kannan, bring your very heartcake chat show called Candid Kannan. Tune in every Friday on the IVM Podcast app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Eventually, you'll see the end of your childhood,
Get accustomed to womanhood.
enjoy the experience of sisterhood,
Might get to wifehood
or not, choose motherhood,
or not. You'll learn to define your personhood.
earn a livelihood,
Change the neighborhood.
and get rid of the falsehood that life post-academia is easy.
So join me, Ritasha,
And me, Ayushi,
on a journey from station starting point.
to station, what now?
Next station, Pudil station, and hopefully, Agla station, adulthood.
Fresh episodes out every Thursday.